Hey everyone, welcome to another session, another Thursday session that we do for 0 to 1. Maybe you joined us yesterday for an event we did on our Wednesdays, but we're also now building some nice momentum with events on the Thursday as well. As you may or may not be aware, we put a little bit of a flavor on what's happening in the market in South Asia, in India in particular, a very exciting market, as many of you will know. I know that a lot of our members join us from say Singapore, Cambodia, Malaysia, etc. But I'm sure they're also aware of just how exciting things are over there, with a huge base of freelancers, a lot of entrepreneurial spirit going on as well. And if you've joined us on any of the previous events on Thursdays, you'll see that actually what's also been really nice is an opportunity to spotlight some more of the entrepreneurialism that's happening in that part of the world as well. And I think we're really excited to have Swatantra with us today, who's going to share his point of view as well. And the topic this week is called MVP to Millions. So just in case anyone is unaware, MVP standing for minimum viable product, or I guess the most basic form of a product that you can get out there in front of your market, your customers, to test and to see how you can grow. And we think obviously this is an important topic because so many of our members are very early stage founders, or maybe they are working in a corporate environment and they have an interest to maybe shift into an entrepreneurial environment. And I know that one of the big questions that always kind of comes up is, how do I start? What is sufficient? What does it look like in that sense? And then how do I continue to scale beyond that as well? And I think it's a super timely topic, and we're really thankful to have you here, Swatantra. So I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Thanks a lot for the introduction, Jimmy, and thanks for having me. And yeah, I think we'll give you a brief introduction first of who I am, what I've been doing last couple of years. So I'm a 2018 graduate from India, computer science grad, and post my graduation, worked for a couple of months, not years, for a travel tech company in India. It's just like Expedia of India called Yatra.com. And after a couple of months, stepped down and started building my first venture. It was called Able Jobs. So Able was a skilling app for non-tech jobs in India for roles like sales, operations, finance. We used to upskill folks through our app, which basically through courses which were created in-house by our team. And then these folks, after they complete these courses, were applying to companies like Amazon, Flipkart, Uber, hiring for these jobs in India. Started from scratch, MVP, and we scaled to around 3 million users in India, and basically placed more than 40,000 people across the country in multiple job roles. Was a venture capital backed business, raised around $2.3 million from Y Combinator and a couple of other global investors. And yeah, this is what I was doing for almost 4 years. Last year, Able got acquired by a American unicorn called InstaWork. So yeah, this was my edtech B2C journey. Post that, I'm right now, I was on a break for a while, and right now I'm more focused on building a venture studio that focuses on early stage founders and trying to build a framework that could help them, and tech focus to get a head start. Basically, the learnings we made, a lot of mistakes we did, we are trying to templarize that into a framework, and that is what I'm spending my time these days. Yeah, so this is about me.
Brilliant. Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate that. And I guess just to tell the audience, I guess they're here as well. So what we're going to do today is have it as like a conversation, like think of it a bit like a fireside chat in that sense. So please do get your questions in, just in case you're unaware. There's a Q&A button at the bottom. So if you type your questions in there, so Han, my able co-host, is going to man that side of things, and then I guess we'll kick off as well, because I've got a few sort of bits or paths I'd be curious to take it in, based at least on the sorts of conversations we have with our members as well. But of course, if you want to add any comments as well, you can feel free to do so in the chat. And also, last thing I'll mention from a housekeeping point of view, if you also want to raise your hand and I can unmute you, you can either ask your question verbally, or if you just want to add some context in as well. We definitely want to make this interactive if we can as well. But I appreciate sometimes people just want to listen and absorb, and maybe they think on it and then they have the questions later. So we'll take it at everyone's pace in that sense. So yeah, I mean, firstly, what you just described, I think it sounds fantastic. You know, the fact that you've been able to take a business from scratch, receive that level of investment, and then exit as well, which is not always easy. You know, sometimes founders of businesses, they're in it, it can be difficult. You know, you've got that kind of sunk cost bias as well, where you've like, I put so much time, I put so much capital, things like that into it, and I don't necessarily know when the right time to exit is in that sense. So, like, could you maybe tell us a little bit more about that journey, what the milestones look like? You mentioned you found a lot of challenges, and of course failures help us to grow and things as well. So, it'd be good to hear a little bit more on that from your point
So,
of view.
Jamie, I think maybe we should start this with the very early stages. Like, quite often, I personally believe the most difficult stage for any founder is
Yeah.
0 1, how to get started. Is it something where I should invest my next couple of years of life? And yeah, it's the toughest part. It's not easy. So we started in 2018. So at that time, uh, that one thing was very clear for me and my two co-founders at that time was EdTech. We love education. We believe
Mm,
that education could create massive disruption and wanted to solve on that front. So we were aligned that education would be something we would be focusing on as a problem statement we want to solve. Now the challenge was what would be the problem statement. So it all started like a side project for us. Like we were searching for a problem, right? Problem is an inefficiency in a system. So we realized there were open schools in India where folks take admission for degrees like Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts, and there were a lot of folks who were not able to graduate. So it looked like an inefficiency where maybe a skill gap problem, if which we could try to solve. And why not cater that? Open schools in India, there are some like IGNOU and iOS where we started building more of a community first, where we tried to engage people through the assignments, some study material which we could find for the courses they were taking, enrolling in, and was part of their curriculum. And the community started generating. Facebook was the social platform of that time. We had a Facebook page, and folks started engaging more and more followers, 20,000 followers we crossed. And then we were like, okay, let's start the next phase, which was MVP building. And
mm,
then we set an app. It was a very basic app, which was more like a platform where you could get all your notes and basically for your curriculum assignments. And you could also have a discussion on doubts, etc. And that is what we said. And we got a couple of users. And this is something that was a very big turning point for us. It was a side project, right? We were all having day jobs, and we were taking it on weekends, sometimes late night, discussing our thesis and defining it, how to validate that. And once we set that up, we got a pretty unique insight. Folks were downloading this app. They were saving the notes, assignments in the content in the app, but no one was actually consuming that. So that was a kind of a big question mark. What exactly is happening here, right? And this is where we actually did something which I personally believe is very critical for early stage for any founder. Start talking to your users. We did a lot of
mm,
dives. We used to call folks, what are you doing, who you are, and how you study, what you doing, why you sometimes direct questions, why you're not even basically consuming, basically going through the notes which you or assignments which are on the app. And that is, I think, the best form analytics that you could get if you actually know who are these people and who you are solving for, right? So we got pretty interesting insights during those days that our folks were quite often belonging to humble backgrounds. Uh, Maybe they were in open schools because they can't afford to go for a full-time university curriculum because they were quite often bread earners or supporting the family, and there were a lot of similar patterns which started building the user persona. And university enrollment in their case was a mode to get a bachelor's degree, or that makes them eligible for the jobs which were actually available. India is booming with its startup ecosystem. A lot of top jobs are getting created, but quite often the curriculum in a university is not something that gets them the skill set that would be required for
Yeah.
these jobs. But bachelor's degree is what quite often is a eligibility criteria. So folks have to enroll after their basically schools to get a bachelor's degree. And if you they start supporting the family early on, then open universities was the way. And definitely the lack of focus now became evident for us. Why they were not consuming these basically notes, etc., which were because we were not solving the right problem statement. The promise we were delivering is not correct. The fundamental outcome they want was a better job, right? Something that will create a better impact for them in terms of finances, in terms of growth, and for supporting the family. And this degree was a medium, not the outcome. By medium, I mean this was something that was making them eligible for the next set of problem statement, which was the real problem statement they were trying to solve. And I think so on retrospect, it's just like one of my insight. Like maybe from you could even start from day one, start talking to people, the persona you think you are trying to solve problems, because that could save you a lot of time. Like I would have personally preferred that I would have known this problem statement even before sipping an app, spending almost 30 days to build, write the code and say maybe it could have been as simple as calling and understanding what's the real problem is what you're trying to solve, right? So that's a thought process here. And yeah, so then we realized, okay, maybe the problem statement that needs to be solved is something pretty different. And then we started talking to the other side, the founders of these companies, which were creating jobs in the country, right?
Mm.
There were a lot of basically India's social networks, chat. Then there was Velocity, Unicorn, deliveries, Big Boss. We talked to a lot of maybe HRs, founders, trying to understand what are the types of jobs these companies are creating and how we could prepare our persona for these jobs. So there we found a pretty interesting problem statement that these companies are struggling on the hiring front. Could be as worse as 60 to 70 interviews just to have 3 or 4 folks. So, and they were of the opinion, can you give us good skilled talent so that we could close our hirings because they are taking 2 months, up to 2 months, just to close a couple of simple roles for them. By simple, I mean like basically roles that they don't expect such a difficult hiring scenario for them. So the thesis became more clear for us that there's a skill gap problem. So now the real definition of MVP comes into picture. This time, I think we have learned our lesson. There's no need to write your code and sit an app this time. So the MVP would be as simple as the thesis is, can we upskill people and get them job? MVP could be something like WhatsApp. We actually did it on WhatsApp. My co-founder used
Mm.
to create content, and basically all the folks who were interested in the companies we were working with initially, we used to send them content on WhatsApp, and that was getting consumed, and assignments were basically evaluating, quizzing was happening on Google Forms. After they were completing the content, they were submitting their basically MCQs on Google Forms, and that's how we were upskilling initially. And then definitely you go for a more personalized calls front. So, and we actually were able to basically help a couple of folks get a job. In fact, not couple, almost all of the folks who went through the initial training were getting hired in the companies for the curriculum we were training them, which we were working in partnership with the company, understanding what they exactly want, and they were finding the experience great. So there was no app involved. There was all the simple platforms over there. And in fact, I will share a couple of pointers on this front. Like even during this phase, we were always learning, and like initially, we sent a very big content covering entire part of the job role. They were literally opting out for the training front. That was a learning point for us. Like, okay, our persona needs very crisp to the point content. So the next format, which basically we started using was slides, decks only covering the relevant set of information in a very crisp form, and that works for the number of folks completing the curriculum and then completing the quizzes and doing good as well without any compromise on the quality front, starting really. So you don't actually quite often during early days maybe require, unless you're building a very sophisticated AI or something, real product to validate your thesis. Or maybe it's something that's already because in fact we generated revenue without even a product because during the initial days we looked pictured us more like a recruitment company for the partner companies we were working with. Our talent was definitely way more skilled than the headhunting recruitment companies which were there. And we were getting a really good success rate, and the companies were ready to pay for us. So, yeah, this is a very real definition of MVP that which you could justify. And by the time I actually started writing the first code piece of the app, we were already having a really amazing learning, right? Our users wanted a crisp form of content. We were doing that. From the type of questions we were putting on Google Forms, we knew the type of quizzes that would be there on the app. So yeah, talk to users, take as many basically as non optimal ways to validate the thesis and build things right from day one. No need to refrain for the next 2 months to ship your first versions through app and stuff like that. So yeah, this was the journey, and in a couple of months, the thesis was validated. So basically we were in India's Silicon Valley, Bangalore, writing the app, working with more and more companies. Companies were loving the overall experience. And during this time, we initially more of, as I mentioned, was looking like a recruitment company. Because yeah, the user base was growing. We analyzed pattern that okay, the setup, if it's a support role, the initial modules would be very same for companies. Then company specific modules would be there. So we made the app public. Initially, it was a private app which we were just catering the companies we were working with. And through this journey, the first version of the public app came into picture. Installs started happening, and I will say that one point I would say that given that the thesis has been validated, and then we are shipping something, we were way more confident that okay, this work, this not work, this is what our users want. But yeah, it's always an ongoing process, right? So uh, during the next 8 months, things were really fast. We were breaking things and validating a lot of thesis and working on the growth front as well. We knew what our users want. One of my co-founders started a YouTube channel where we started experimenting on the content front, like what type of content our person. We knew we were talking to users, we were working directly with them, we were validating the data on the app, how the learning process looks like. Now the idea was how to get users, and we were bootstrapped. We didn't have any money, right? We were pretty early college grads, and we had to find a scalable way to get users on the platform. So YouTube, why we choose YouTube? Uh, Quite often it's always a good, basically decision to see what other in your sector are doing. You don't need to be very disruptive or spending on paid ads on day one. YouTube was a go-to platform in India at that time for a lot of edtech companies, and we were also in edtech, so it was a easy bet to focus on YouTube during early days. And when the started putting videos, we got traction, but yeah, the initial videos were not that good in performance. And as we continued working on that growth channel, we realized, okay, this is the type of videos that work really well. Couple of them started really picking up. And I think by that time I was there were 150,000 plus subscribers on our YouTube channel after a while. So it's always an ongoing journey. Just as you are working on the app front to understand what's how you could better give the experience. Same is the case on growth. If you're looking for hackable ways of growth, you have to constantly experiment. We were very
Mm.
consistent on that front as well, trying different ways to drive growth. And quite often, I recommend the founders during early days to focus not more. Focus is the key. Don't focus on more than one organic growth channel. Same is the case with the product, right? Don't focus on super diverse set of things. Only figure out one specific problem statement and very much focus on that. That was our learning as well over that time. We did made those mistakes. So that's a recommendation on that front. 9 months increase the number of companies. We were actually working with some really big brands, helping them with their hiring front, and then we raised our first seed. That was from Y Combinator, which I think if the audience is not aware, it's a Silicon Valley-based startup accelerator which funds pre-seed companies, and it's considered one of the finest out there. So basically, that is the initial setup journey. During these phases, a couple of my learning, if possible, sometimes fundraisers are difficult. We literally pitched to all the funds in India. No one was ready to take a bet because it was a concern that will you be able to scale? Uh,
Mm,
EdTech is quite often considered, especially I'm talking of 4 to 5 years back, right? But even that was a question for us as well, that will you be able to upskill for non-tech roles to an app? Will it be scalable? How many users would be actually using it? So yeah, no one was ready to take a bet. So what survived us was bootstrapping. We were making money as a recruitment company. So quite often, I always get this from a lot of founders like, okay, I'm not getting funding. If I get that funding, I will build a product. I'm like, okay, can you figure out another way? Uh, I don't think there's a correlation in between building a product and getting capital first. Find hackable ways. We did not have, in fact, what worked, everything worked in our favor. We didn't have capital to invest on uh, performance ads. So we had to find the organic growth channels to drive the growth. We didn't have the capital to hire a good engineering team. So I was writing the code, full stack back and everything. Uh, my co-founder was creating the content. But all three of us became expert in the domain we were solving, right? And really good because we didn't had other options. We had to pay the bills because we were expanding our team. So we were generating revenue, maybe as a HR company at that time. That through which we were paying for the folks we were hiring during the scaling thing. So that survived us for almost 8 to 10 months before we got our first pre-seed, and that was only possible because we survived. And startups are quite often more around survival. Each and every day you are trying to survive to reach the next stage of your growth journey or building journey, right? So do whatever it takes that keeps the company alive. Don't think that, okay, if it's not, maybe this is the current revenue model, uh, but it's not aligning to the idea. It doesn't matter really. As long as it's giving you the money in the bank to survive and go uh, to the next step, just do it. So yeah, so once we got into YC, we were in a Bay Area for a while. Got to work with Michael Sabel and other YC partners. That was also a really good turning point for us. We got way more discipline and number focus in terms of the metrics we have to chase. The revenue became a very important parameter, and definitely we did a lot of experiment. And at that time, we focused to pivot because now we had that capital at least to focus completely into an edtech company. And basically, this is where the next set of journey for us looked like, where we basically we made it completely free for the companies to hire from our platform. That drove
mm,
big company growth. We were literally working with every major brands who were in India who were hiring for non-tech jobs. And at the same time, we started implementing experiments on the user front in terms of can we start monetizing on the user front, because from day one saw us more like the education was the most important value. And that is more of catering the users, right? So we started experimenting on that front, and there's something called ISA that was becoming very popular at that time, which is basically called income share agreement, which is where you let your people complete the curriculum, a really high quality curriculum, so that they get a job. And once they get a job and they start getting salary, they could start investing basically uh, in the course fee. So this way you are becoming an outcome focused company. And yeah, this was the journey. And the next phase of our building, where we started the Answer Cup IS in India. Uh, the 3 months were really good. We scaled the user base, placement was shooting up, I think we crossed around first 100,000 users. And at that time, I think, yeah, YouTube picked really well. And in fact, we built another set of strategy. YouTube influencers was the next easy step. Like, okay, we know the format of content. And I think we were some of the early folks who were engaging with influencers to drive the growth at the same time on the app front. Definitely we were well aware that what is driving the growth, build the content on the app this way, made it super scalable for the team to create new content. And so the quality brought in a lot of analytics. So we used to work very on a two-weekly sprint base where we define the thesis, the next set of experiment that it's. I still believe in this framework that always have 0 to 1 problems and 1 to n problems. For folks who are not very well aware of these 0 to 1 problems are where you don't know if it works or not works. I'm talking in
Mm.
a very simplified way. 1 to n problems, okay, we know this is working. How to scale this? We will classify that as 1 to n. 0 to 1, the best way to solve is because we don't know what works, do as many experiments possible in limited time. Chances are quite high if you are able to achieve 6 to 7 experiments, 1 or 2 will work. During 1 to n, you know this is working based on what are the set of ways how to scale this. Then 1 to n is more of efficiency problem. How could you optimize and make more scalable what is working? So this is how we used to plan our work front during the app growth as well. We were doing a lot of experiment on the user front. Same is the case on the growth front, trying a lot of format of content, figuring out what's working at the same time scaling what was working, what was not working, scrapping that, figuring out the next set of experiments. So build our team. We at least we raised it was COVID. That too is a very crazy story. We were part of the Winter 20 batch of Y Combinator. That's the batch that got hit by COVID. So in the middle of the batch, we had to run back to the country, save our lives, and there was a pretty chaotic time for everyone, I think,
Yeah.
for every part of the world. And our demo day got hit because it was just 1 month before demo day. Obviously, you have limited capital in the bank. You need capital to survive as a venture back company, right? And luckily, we were led by a fund in India, and we closed a $1.8 million funding that was required basically for the next phase of the growth and the experiments we were planning to do. And I will say quite often there's one more learning in this aspect is if possible from day one is always good to again this is way more tactical on the investment front. It's never bad to be constantly connected to the ecosystem to understand if you are planning to build a venture capital back business to understand stay connected to the ecosystem, be engaged with funds you think who could be interested in investing in the space you are building and always have a good term because quite often it's not like all of especially if you are not a superstar pitcher that you go and you pitch and you come back with a couple of millions in back, right? It takes time, right? Maybe the funds who invested in us, we were engaged with them for the almost more than a year, and they were seeing we were always keeping them updates, having frequent meetings with them, and it hurts, right? It feels bad if you face and people are like, maybe we are not aligned or basically let's stay in touch, but this is part of the, I think during my YC batch or even today also, I really doubt most of the founders I know today. Those folks who went there in a single go, raised a couple of $1 million and came back. You keep growing and you keep showing the progress. Always, this is especially something which I think the CEO has to constantly get involved apart from also the execution on the company front that keep engaged with the
Mm.
funds or any potential angel who could take a bet because it's not binary that, okay, I want to invest, or I don't want to invest. It's often something which is a long-term engagement and they build that trust with you. The journey you sow, the effort you put to on that problem statement and because you have to understand the other side of the story, right? If you are getting bombarded with thousands of decks every day, it's very difficult for anyone to decide who is the right bet or for the market I'm planning to invest in. That would be only validated from what someone sees in the period they know you, right? So this is also something maybe that worked for us because it was not someone new who saved us at that time because COVID made it really difficult. Our demo did not happen in person. It was just a new website that was created with just our deck. So someone who survived
Mm.
us was someone we knew in the past itself. So uh, this was the next set of journey for us. Started building again, brought education fully focused mode for the education front, scaled things up. We were doing around 200 placements per month, 400 enrollments per month, and over this period also a new set of problem we came into picture. We realized that maybe ISC is not something that will work in India market because quite often there are challenges where you get people placed, but once they get a job, they're not actually wanting to basically pay back the course fee to the lending companies who sponsor their fees, and quite often they won't have the credits free. So we would be taking the risk, and that makes things tough. So we decided, okay, let's stop that uh, concept and focus more on the fully upfront payment model, and that took another set of pivot for us, and pivots are always tough, right? You put a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on the founders. It's your work-life balance. It's tough for the company as well. But yeah, survival is the key. The faster you take hard decisions, the better for you, right? That worked for us. Basically, at least once we switched to the new model, uh, we figure out, yeah, this is working. At least it's not hitting you the money in the bank. It's feasible, and we started scaling things up. So this has been a roller coaster journey, and just wanted to give a glimpse on different fronts and basically so that we could have more tactical discuss. It's
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and that's fantastic. I mean, I think you're already sharing some absolute nuggets of wisdom in there as well, and the best learning is the things that you actually experience yourself as well, going through the ups and downs, the roller coaster you just mentioned. Just in case you're wondering, I was making notes because I didn't want to miss like all the big points that you shared. So I got my notes here in my book. So I'm going to go back to some of
Lovely.
these points because I'd love to dig in on a couple of them in particular. Um, and this is
Sure.
actually based off of the types of questions that we get asked or the types of questions that come up maybe in some of the other weekly sessions that we do as well. And I would say like one of
Okay.
the first ones, so like kind of if we rewind back to what you mentioned at the start, where you said, you know, one of your tips was to have a single problem statement to focus on and work on validating that. And I guess the learning that you had from that is that talking to users as soon as possible helps you, you know, really
Right.
refine that problem statement. I guess one of the questions I was curious on is I speak to some founders where you know, they build the concept or a business around a problem that tends to impact them, you know, personally in that sense, and that kind of, you know, that
Right.
drives them forward in that sense. In this
Mm.
instance, it doesn't seem like, I mean, it seems more like you saw a market opportunity in that sense, as opposed to one that was sort of, you know, paining you yourself. But then, of course, you found out that other people had that pain themselves. So I was just wondering, like, how do you go about tackling that in that sense? Because I think sometimes you could
Mhm.
have that entrepreneurial
Mhm.
drive, but you just don't
Mm.
know where to start if you don't have a, you know, if there's not
Mhm.
something paining you right now in that sense.
I think this is a very common problem statement with quite often early stage founders deal with, right? Okay. Maybe if you are working in a real estate space or any particular space where you see an inefficiency, maybe you are in wealth management and you have worked there for the next 5, 10 years. That's another framework where, okay, I know this is an inefficiency. I know what's the right way to solve, and I will solve this because I experienced that thing. But there are other sites like, okay, I was just a college graduate. I had no work experience and I too want to build. So that is actually the beauty of basically entrepreneurship, Jamie. Like, I personally believe there's no hard and fast rule. And what I am
Mm,
saying maybe is not something that will work for someone else, right? So that's where the founders need to be very certain that, okay, if you're solving a problem, chances are quite high it's something new, maybe a blue ocean, right? Which quite often we call that is something that has not been solved before. And
yeah.
it doesn't really matter that maybe if you have that experience solving that problem, or if you are new to that market, that how you, in the end, it all just comes to one thing. If there is a problem, are the users willing to pay for it? These two things literally summarize it. If there is a problem, find a way to validate it's a problem. If you could validate and you this second, you think that it's big enough, but often Y Combinator says that is it a burning problem? A burning problem is like, okay, maybe I will give a very lame example on that front. During early days of ChatGPT, it was really terrible. It used to go down, but I'm willing to pay for it because I am ready to. I'm super frustrated if it's not working because it's adding really good value for me, right? So that is the definition of burning problem. Like I'm ready to pay for it. I want the it up time because it's something that's solving my burning problem. It's creating a lot of efficiencies for maybe these are the type of problems that actually is mattering to solve. And coming back to your point, what if a founder don't come from that background where he's well aware. So there's no limit. That's why in that case, it's even more important that you talk to users to validate that case. Is it a real
Mm,
problem? Is it something really burning? And if you think quite often, it's also difficult to identify the problem, right? Forget about validating if it's a burning problem. If there are problem, in that case, also, I think talking to users is the most important parameter to define a thesis. See, you have to take bold steps. There's no right or wrong. In the end, it's all about experiments. You talk to people, you define a thesis. Okay, it looks this would be a problem. If you think the thesis is something you are ready to take a bet, find the fastest way to validate that thesis. That's it. Just continue this cycle. Maybe in a couple of iterations, you will really find a problem statement that you validated because what gives you the commitment to solve a problem is data.
mm.
If nothing else could give you commitment to spend the next 2 to 3 years on that problem. If it would be a thesis that is getting validated up by the experiments you conduct, then you will be definitely the next problem you are solving is a better problem to solve because now you have validated that. So running a small experiment could be as simple as teaching people on WhatsApp and getting them placed, right? Just do it. And thesis validation, that's it. Define a thesis, talking to users, identifying, find the fastest way. That's why during the early stages, it's more important to iterate fast because you need to define a couple of theses, find hackable ways to validate them. I will say if you are the other side, have not experienced couple of 30, 40 years in or at least 10 years in a sector, just go with this framework. Maybe it's something that will give you the right problem statement better at a faster way.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the data focus as well because it's harder to argue with the data. So, yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's a nice segue actually to questions which I can see have popped in, which I'll mute myself and Han will put forward to you.
So, hi, Swat. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So we have a few questions coming in the Q&A from one of the attendees. So how do you know when to pivot?
How do we know when to pivot? Yeah, see, I think I will say it's more of a cycle. If you have to pivot, I think so quite often it's more of a psychological game than it's a data-driven game. If you have just imagine you as a founder have been working, let's say 14, 15 hours, even on weekdays on a problem statement, and after 1 year, you like maybe things are not moving, right? Just think of the mental challenge you are, not even forget about 1 year, maybe for the next 2 months. If I ask you guys, okay, you would guys would be working from 7 days a week to on this problem statement, then things are not moving. So it becomes very difficult mentally for, okay, maybe it's time has come to start from ground, something new because I put things. And it's not about maybe initially things went promising. You try to scale things up, but you reach a scale where things get capped, right? So when to pivot, I will say quite often in real terms, as I earlier said, data will show you the numbers. But data is never wrong. Again and again, you will realize in life, data is the key. If data is not promising, maybe the growth has came to a stagnation, or maybe it was never there, and you spend 2 to 3 months, you have to better be prepared mentally. Okay, or and my co-founder has to sit, and you have to accept the reality. Okay, it's not about we are not folks who have the quite often it's a time where maybe sometimes you get in a personal crisis, or maybe I am not the right person to solve this. Maybe I'm not skilled enough. Maybe, but it doesn't matter, right? What is important is that have you asked yourself, have you tried all the iterations? Have you moved fast? If not, maybe you want to give it a bet. If you think you have tried decent iterations, but and you will have the learning, okay, this is the behavior of my users, and this is why this is not looking like a fit. And then comes the heart of, okay, let's find some nearby market or from the learnings, the next set of steps. And we have to, quite often, there are teams involved, right? You hired a couple of us. That makes it even worse to take pivot decision, right? Maybe you have to let go couple of folks. But this is the hard reality, and it's totally normal, right? Every founder has to go through those tough decisions. And when to pivot is simple. Like, if you think the data is something you can't deny, which your brain wants to, but you have to accept that, then is the right time to do the next set of experiments and do what is important to save the business.
Yeah, I believe that's a great answer. Thank you, Swat. So,
Welcome.
Jamie, do you have anything to add on to this?
I was just going to say, I think you said it on the data point, and then I guess maybe just reiterating what you also said about speaking to users. I guess obviously you wouldn't necessarily go straight to existing customers and say we're going to change our business completely. What do you think? But you could say, oh, we're considering maybe another angle. How does this sound? Does it sound like it would
Sure.
help you even more or something like that, and do more validation, I guess.
Just to add to your point, JP, if you need to pivot, quite often your users won't be really worried about it. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, because it's whatever is is.
Then
It's
you
not
won't be
necessarily.
having that discussion. Maybe this is a good way, right? Maybe no one really cares. Now it's the time to pivot. Because see, you will get attached to the problem statement. This is something which any founder will face, right? And but you have to
Mm,
see the other part of the harsh reality that maybe this is not the thing, right? You have to take that call. Because if you do that, the chances are better to save the company than this, right? So you have to take call.
yeah,
And believe me, at least 90% of the time founders know it's not working. But the game is more of the mental convincing.
okay. Over to you, Han.
So yeah, we do have another question in the chat that says, did you kill an idea in your MVP that later became essential to reaching a product market fit?
Did I kill an idea in my MVP,
Yeah, later became
which
essential for your product market to reach your product market fit.
got it. Killing an idea at MVP stage. Actually, chances are quite high. There would be cases where maybe something we initially think will work and we backed out it. Maybe we did not put enough effort, or maybe that was not the right time for that. Like for our case, I think we initially tried referral, but that didn't really work. But once we crossed a couple of million users, referral started generating organic install for us. But yeah, maybe that was initially it was not the right time because if you have a very limited user base. Prefer is a engine growth engine that builds on top of a existing user base. So it was a bad experiment during early days, but yeah, later on, it worked for us to drive organic install right at a stage once we have a predictable pipeline through other growth channels.
I see. So, Jamie, do you have anything to add on to this as well, or shall I move on to the next question?
No, all good.
Okay, so next question from another anonymous attendee is, so he or she is basically asking for some tips on growing his or her YouTube channel. And so he or she wants 100K subscribers to do paid partnerships, and he or she is interested in EV cars and mobility as well.
Understood. My recommendation would be to be consistent. Is the most important tip that maybe start with consistency in the number of videos you are basically putting on YouTube every week and constantly iterating. So over the period, and it's the same story that is in our case, like for the almost 1, 2 months. And I think I was in a discussion last year with a couple of other founders where the YouTube became a channel for them, and the story was the same. Like in a couple of months, if you are consistent with limited views but consistent, you will figure out, okay, what is the set of messaging that worked for them? What is the set of value add or promise that becomes the clickbait for users to reach to your platform. At the same time, figuring out what's working for your competitors is often a very good hack to decrease the number of experiments you have to do to figure things out. I think for any growth channel, especially organic growth channel, what my personal learning has been that if it's not working, chances are quite high that people give up after a while. Right, okay, I spend a couple of months and it's not giving me the outcome. But I think what actually happens is like if it's 2 to 3 months of learning and iterating is where you find the PMF, at least on the growth front, whether it's SEO, whether it's YouTube or any other organic growth channel where you have to be consistent and putting effort. And that is the most important tip I will say that maybe organic growth is more on resilient, but you have to understand that once you crack that, it becomes your biggest move because you have cracked an organic growth channel and that will be most reliable. Paid ads may not be reliable. CAC will increase over time. Maybe your competitors figure out it's working. They also start using those channels, right? But it's very difficult to replicate a growth of an organic growth channel. It takes time, effort. Same is the case with SEO. If you are creating content and over the period of time, consistent figuring out what's driving that traffic. Just imagine if the next day I'm like, Jimmy, I'm going to kill your growth. It will be something of a 3 to 4 months of learning and that growth which you are continuing now compounding. I have to beat that. I could have done the same with paid ads, right? So anyway, organic growth driving is something that takes time, effort to and I strongly believe that the founders should be the ones rather than quite often, basically during early days, founders would be the best folks to solve those problems because it gives you the learning as well. If you are the person who's solving growth, you would be directly connected to the user persona you are trying to onboard on the platform. So you will be getting an insight of what they really want as well. So be consistent.
Yeah, very great answer. I also think, after all, consistency is the key in most of the things. So some people, they're too scared to start. Meanwhile, some people, they're too scared to stop as well, which kind of relates back to the very first question as well. And I would also like to ask something from my side, which is like, consistency is key, but on the other hand, when should we ideally stop and take a reflection to see what
Mhm.
is working, what is not? Like how often should
Mm.
we track our own metrics?
Understood. Yeah, that's actually a great question. So I will say the best way is that if you are not left with more 0 to 1 experiments, that is the time to stop. Like if today I tried something, it did not work, but okay, I saw my competitor, this is working, or maybe a similar market where something is working. I jotted down these set of experiments, 7 to 8 experiments that I would be trying to execute in the next 2 to 3 months. I am consistent that okay, 2 experiments would be going live in the next uh 2 weeks, and I'm pretty much and in this execution, there will be two things. Either out of, and chances are quite high, first will happen. Either of the 8 or 9 experiments we are trying to do, in most cases, one or two will work out. In worst case, the second case, none of them work out. You got the answer. Now try to figure something out. But the one or two that worked out change everything because then you know, okay, this is working out. Now I have to define the next setup. experiment that resembles what is working on, right? That completely changes your next set of 0-1 problem statement. So better think of it more like on an experiment front. Like once you are ready to say that, okay, I don't have any other experiment left to validate this thesis, maybe time is there to stop that. If you think there are a couple of more experiments, just try to validate them as soon as possible.
Thank you, Swat. So we have
Yeah.
another question in the chat as well. How much money is needed to start an AI startup?
See, that's a very broad question because AI itself is a very complex problem statement. Are you building LLM models that requires a lot of GPU? Maybe then you need capital, but quite often there are companies through which you could get a startup grant, or it's like a business problem you are trying to implement uh, uh, basically with APIs, wrapper APIs on LLM models like Open AI or something. So in that case, it would be a very different story. So uh, really difficult to answer without getting the exact context of what exactly you're trying to solve. But I will say that as long as you are not building a foundational model, it's not something that should be costing you money. You will always find hackable ways to solve them. You could be in a self-funded state. It's not something that should cost you money, especially during early days.
Yeah, fair point. I'll jump in on that one as well and just sort of say, yeah, I think from our point of view, I think if it probably comes back to what you said at the beginning, which is what is the problem statement? Um, in a sense, AI is one of the tools or the pathways to get you to solve that problem statement in that sense. So could it be done in a faster, more efficient way? Then possibly yes, right? I've seen some really cool use cases coming out in the last 12 months of people using AI to solve other challenges. Like maybe I saw one, for example, where a business had put something together to do market research. So the AI agent would listen to the person, ask them questions about their grocery shopping habits, for example, and then gather all that information into something. So taking something, I guess, that was usually very manual and time consuming and then making it faster. So I suppose in that point of view, that's probably where I'd start in that sense. Yeah, I think maybe the boat has sailed in terms of trying to be the next open AI or something like that. You're probably going to be up against some of these multi-billion-dollar giants. So it's then just using that really
Yeah,
and
I
building it.
assume that if you are building a application use case of a AI LLM agent, API calls are pretty cheap. It could be as low as $100 a month to support that. And to be honest, again, this is from my own side. If you think maybe right now you're just validating a thesis as a side project rather than going all out, maybe your day job gives you enough capital to have a small chunk to invest in the thesis generation. I think in most of the cases it's possible, right? Especially in the current time where even there are companies who have shown that you could build foundational models at a very half, almost uh, one-third the budget or even lesser budget today. So I think just you are a founder, your job is to find hackable ways to solve a problem. Like the first hack would be to make it affordable.
Yeah, fair enough. Another question for you, Hans. So I'll mute myself.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, we have another question that says, "Hi, Swat. Thanks for the great insights. And with reference to the above question, which is related to AI, what and where should Indian founders be focusing on to really make a difference in the next 5 years?"
Got it. See, I was in New York last month and have been very much connected in the Indian ecosystem as well. So last 2 years have been very pivoting for the global startup founders, given that what was something that was the easily, you could say, a framework of how to build a venture capital backed company is bit on a to and fro in terms of, okay, maybe this is not working. Maybe a new release from ChatGPT will kill our business, right? So this has been last couple of years has been a tough time for a lot of founders. But if I have to take a bet, and from the data which I have seen the last couple of years in the American Indian ecosystem, if you're trying to build an AI space, take a sector that has been pretty traditional right now. Maybe and if you have an expertise in that market, maybe wealth management, if you are an expert in that, and or maybe real estate, if you know the nuances of that sector, you spend a couple of years in that. Again, I'm just giving, obviously, there are thousands of other use cases. And if you try to use a AI based, basically applying LLMs to disrupt an industry which has not been disrupted for the last, let's say, 50 or 100 years and has been operationally again, that is something that is getting a lot of basically use cases which are genuine and creating really impactful solutions. And I'm also seeing a lot of capital investment on that front as well. So traditional sector, disrupting it with AI, with your expertise in that sector is something I would personally take a bet on if I have to build in that space.
Thank you so much for your answers, Swat. So yes, do we have more questions from the attendees, or does Jamie have anything to add on to this?
Yeah, no, I love that answer, and it reminded me of a session that we did a couple of weeks ago as well with a founder based in India who's taken kind of a cultural heritage industry and tried to make it more modernized and also to be a for-profit businesses where they're usually seen as not-for-profit government-backed type businesses. And she's managed to create 70 partnerships. She's doing creative things in terms of like how they communicate out to people. And I love that as well because it's an industry that maybe a lot of people might overlook because they think, oh, okay, that's like, I don't know, a museum or something like that. They maybe think, oh, that's very well established, but actually there's a lot of these industries that could be innovated on by using the current technology you said and disrupting it. So I think that's a really good recommendation to give to people, is to have a little think about that and see, okay, what other industries could be could have a twist to it that could suddenly be really interesting to people. Yeah, cool. Okay, I don't think we've got any more questions. I realize we're at the hour in that sense, but I think it's been a fantastic session. I'm sure we should definitely do a part 2 at some point because I want to go even further into the journey as well, and also I'd love to hear a bit more about what you've got on the horizon for yourself as well, because I think obviously all that wisdom that you've acquired and then how that generates into supporting other startups and things like that as well would be really good. So I guess just for those in the audience, like how best can keep in touch with you and follow on what you're currently building?
Definitely, I'm on LinkedIn. Drop me a message. I think this is also something which we could have a separate discussion. If you are trying to solve a problem and do a code reach out, be crisp to the point, precise. Drop me a message on LinkedIn. More than happy to see wherever I could support you or help you out. And yeah, a really great having conversation with you folks. Thanks for having me.
Love that. Yeah, thanks so much.
Perfect.
Well, I appreciate that,
You're
and
welcome.
yeah, I'm looking forward to doing even more of these for sure. Because
So
I was furiously writing my notes just to like all the bits and notes there, which was good. So thank you so much again.
thank you. Looking forward. Have a great day,
you.
guys.
Okay.
Perfect.
Have a
Bye.
great rest of the afternoon. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.